Hey Joe, welcome to the show. How does it feel? Tell me first, before we get started, how does it feel to be in Chicago right now? What's the temperature? What's the weather like?
So I just went out to lunch with my 5-year-old granddaughter and just 39 degrees. Getting from the car into the restaurant, I was just freezing. It was
Yeah.
so uncomfortable. I'd like to be in South Carolina with you right
Oh
now.
man. Tell us a little bit about how did you get into real estate? What was your career path? You're not a physician, right? I'm not a physician, but here we are on the Real Estate Mogul MD. How did we come to this point?
Well, first of all, a large number of the investors in my syndicated investments are actually doctors. And the reason that I'm in real estate is because when I was a kid, I used to cut lawns. And when I was cutting the lawns, I was, getting dirty and smoke was blowing on me from the lawnmower and it was loud. And I'd be cutting the lawn of somebody's home and there'd be a for sale sign across the street. And I'd watch these people drive up in a nice, clean, fancy car and they'd get out of the car and meet somebody there. And it was obviously a showing of a house. And I was looking across the street thinking, why am I pushing this loud, dirty, dusty, smoky lawnmower? I should be in real estate. And at the time, I was only about 16.
Mhm.
So I was earning a living as a kid. And I said, this is no good. I'm going to go into real estate when I grow up. So I went to the University of Michigan and I studied economics and took a bunch of real estate classes. And when I graduated, I went to work for a family that was not my family that had 84 small industrial buildings in the Chicago area, which is where I grew up and where I live. And this family, a father, 2 sons and a daughter, mentored me in industrial real estate. And they were syndicators and they had hundreds of investors over the years and taught me how to do it. And I loved it. I was right when I was 16 and I saw real estate was better than cutting lawns for me. It turned out to be the exact right move. So I love it. I love small industrial buildings with entrepreneurial companies as our tenants. That's what we do.
What areas do you invest in, Joe?
Yes. Well, we were national and we were very large. I built up a company and I brought in many investors, many partners, many employees. And then it became too much for me. I didn't like running a company. So I turned it over to professional managers to run it. And they came up with the brilliant idea of selling the company.
Hmm.
So I have what's called in my background an exit. We sold the company to a much larger company. And I just kept doing the same thing. It was all industrial real estate leasing, industrial real estate sales, bringing in investors, sending cash flow, property management, making sure that the roofs don't leak and that the lawn gets cut and that the rent gets collected. And our tenants are manufacturers and distributors of all kinds. Okay, so this is a really complicated way to do business. I'll tell you why. Because people have never heard of it before. They say, "You what? Real estate's a leverage business. How do you do deals and why would you do deals without any debt?" Well, it goes back to the fact that I'm 64 and I started at 22. So in a 42-year period, I've been through 4 down cycles. And the thing that I've noticed through down cycles is that when things go bad with debt, people lose their properties to the lender or they're forced to sell because of circumstances beyond their control. And having been through it 4 times, I decided there have to be people like me who don't like risk, who prefer the lowest risk possible. And I just thought about it and pondered and journaled and talked to people. And I finally came up with the idea that if we don't have any debt, then we don't have the risk of foreclosure and we have tremendous staying power if a building goes vacant. Because in industrial, most of our buildings are single tenant. We have like 20,000 square foot buildings and 30,000 square foot buildings with one tenant in each. It's either 100% occupied or it's 100% vacant. The way that it works is we have to buy buildings that give us a net operating income or a yield for our investors. It's the same thing when there's no debt, of 7 or 8% starting. And if somebody wants a nice little steady 7%, goes up a little bit every year, maybe 7.25% the next year, and 7.5% and 7.75% up to 8, 8.25%. Over a 10-year period, if we own a building that long, usually we average about 8.5% cash flow. And if a tenant leaves, we replace them. And we don't have to call the bank, and we don't have any covenants with bank loans, which is what kills people. You know, today you're seeing all these office buildings being handed back to lenders, and you're seeing all these people who can't sleep at night, who are in clinical depressions because their world is crashing down around them, and it's all because of debt.
And you started a new company. Who's the first hire for you when you're building a real estate acquisition asset management company?
Back office hires are the most important.
And what do you mean by that?
Accounting and property management and administration.
Okay.
So I brought with me a controller, an accounts payable person, because it's really important that your accounts payable and your accounts receivable, money in and the money out, need to be handled by different people, so there's no stealing and no fraud. In fact, our insurance company requires it, or we don't get a crime policy. Mm-hmm. So also, I have a person that I lovingly call the chief of staff, because every little detail has to be handled. My big job is finding the buildings to buy, and I literally will pick a street, an industrial street. I went to a street in a town here near O'Hare Airport called Ivanhoe, and there are 6 industrial buildings on Ivanhoe. And on Friday of last week, I went to every one of those buildings. And I stopped in and I said, hey, would you consider selling your building? And all I do is I give each one an offer. And even if they say I don't want to sell, I still give them an offer. I want them to know who I am and know that I'm here. And if you make 100 offers, someone's going to say yes. And so we might need to make 2,000 offers a year to get 20 buildings a year, but it's worth it. And the reason I can spend my time doing that is I have the accounting covered and I have the chief of staff in the back office, and I'm not sitting there figuring out how much the tenants have to pay each month, and the property manager inspects the roofs and the parking lots and all that stuff. I don't have to do that either.
So you're making offers on these without knowing the businesses themselves. How are you evaluating? Like, how are you coming up with the number at that point?
So I've been doing this for 42 years.
Uh-huh.
There are 16,000 industrial buildings in Chicago. There's only 3,000 of them that fit our criteria. Our criteria is they have to be under 40,000 square feet, or maybe a little bit over. They have to have really good loading docks. They have to have very good parking. They have to have high ceilings, and they have to be in a location where if they go vacant, a lot of people would like to move there. Mm-hmm. So I've got 3,000 buildings that I keep my eye on, and I sort of rotate, and I pick a street and I go work the street. I have a son and another partner in the business. They do the same thing. Plus industrial real estate is controlled by industrial real estate brokers. They have the tenants, they have the listings, and they bring us deals literally every day. Mm-hmm. So we go on tours with industrial brokers. And after 42 years, I know what a building's worth. If you were to say to me, what is the building at 706 Industrial Drive in Elmhurst? I would tell you that it's got dark brown bricks, that it's occupied by a company called For Your Canine, and they're a dog trainer in an industrial building. That it's on an acre of land, it's 18,440 square feet on an acre of land, and that it's got 36 parking spaces, of which 10 are on the side and 26 are in the back. And you'd say, what? How do you know that? And that's what I have to know. To be so laser focused on one thing makes me an expert and gives me and my investors an incredible edge over everybody else who just doesn't know.